Welcome back. This is mostly going to be a small update video. Plans for this video had sort of been up in the air for a few days, and so I'm not sure how smoothly for the recording will go. I'm still getting used to this new software. I guess I should start with some basic updates. The past few days have been busy. You could almost say a little hectic, but not necessarily in a bad way. Really, it's been a lot of learning and self-reflection, a lot of inner work. Primarily, what's come up is realizing the importance of, for me personally, for finding the balance between magic and practicing magic and studying magic and everyday life. Having a balance there, but also being able to interconnect the two of them. So that's been a goal and a work in progress. I think I mentioned in my last video, via YouTube and some other sources, I've received some tarot readings, and the same cards keep coming up, basically not only telling me that I'm moving into a phase where I need to be attentive to who I'm involving in my life. Some cards have actually spoke about people not being who and what they appear, not necessarily being genuine. And on an intuitive level, I have sensed that. So yeah, that's been a thing, and I'm still working through that. I'm still moving through the levels of trying to determine the validity of it, and things like that. I've come across a few new channels on YouTube that have been useful and interesting, and so I will link to some of those in the description of this video. One in particular I wanted to mention is a YouTube channel. The username is Seer's Cottage, and from what I understand, primarily she does videos on tarot readings and using oracle cards and things like that. But I've really enjoyed the channel so far, and watching her videos actually served as an inspiration for me to sort of begin my own journey and looking at the cards and working with some cards. I actually have here an oracle deck. This deck is the Heart of the Fairy Oracle, and it's made by Brian and Wendy Froud. If you have an interest in fairies or fairy lore, you might be familiar with Brian Froud's work. He does some beautiful illustrations of fairies, and this deck is beautiful. I really like it. I haven't used it very much, but I thought I would do an impromptu drawing and sort of reading from some of the cards during this video, so I'm going to do that momentarily. Bear in mind, I'm very, very new to this, and while I think that to a degree I have some intuitive, ability that I'm connected to or tapped into, I would always say to anyone, no matter who's doing the reading, always take a reading with, a grain of salt, and determine intuitively for yourself if you think the cards or the words spoken have meaning for you. With this oracle deck, I think I'm just going to do I'm probably going to do 3 cards, and these 3 cards are going to be a reflection and some insight into the days ahead this week. This is being filmed really early Monday morning, around 3 a.m. But I think still it will suffice for working for Monday and the rest of the week. So that's kind of my goal with that. Yeah, there's just been a lot going on, energy wise, and material that I've processed, and some practices that I'm working on developing. If you follow me on Twitter, which you probably don't, I don't have many followers there that I interact with. I posted a tweet the other day. It's something that I found on Facebook. Normally I won't repost things, but I did repost this because I thought it was funny and very wise at the same time. So if I can remember, I will link to it in the description for the video. But anyway, this picture is a little comic strip that someone did, and so you've got 2 witches, and one of them rushes into the scene with this vial of glowing, elixir, and she says, "I finally finished my love potion." And so the other witch says, "That's awesome. Who are you gonna, use it on? Who are you gonna make fall in love with you?" And the first witch says, "Myself," like with exclamations, and then she drinks the potion. And I just thought, that's so wise, and neat and novel. I think there again, if you're practicing magic or doing anything in the world, if you exist and you live, self-love is important. I will say, at least for myself, that has been a lesson that I've had to learn and to look at seriously. I do think it's very important, and sadly, unfortunately, oftentimes overlooked, by a lot of people. So yeah, that was kind of a nice little moment over the past few days. There have been some other things occur recently that I will get into later in the video. I don't want to bring them up now. Just what I would call like some insight, some information presented to me, and so then I've had this internal dialogue of awareness, and I have that intuitive feeling that I need to address it in a video. So that's another reason why I wanted to make this recording. I hope in time to reach a place where I'm doing these videos more often. I don't know if it'll ever become a thing where I make a video every day. As I had said before, I did that last year when I was writing that book, and it really becomes a lot of upkeep and work to do. As I had mentioned, doing it via the webcam, you've got kind of crappy quality for the picture and the image. However, it's a lot less tedious and insane of a process. I mean, basically you just turn on the software, connect it to YouTube, and then it records almost automatically. You don't have to worry with it past that. So then there's no worrying with uploading either. You don't have to wait for it to upload. You just wait briefly for it to process, and then you go in and you add, your links and description and all that, and you're done, like, in totality. So yeah, I because this is a lot simpler, I want inevitably to make videos more frequently. This is not involved in that. It's just another thing that I've come across recently, interconnected to the whole self-love thing. I'm very attentive to the media that I take in. If I'm gonna watch a video on YouTube, more than likely it's something about magic or something that interests me. It is sort of a process of learning. I don't watch TV at all, but I don't watch any kind of TV shows, even on the internet. And very rarely do I watch a movie unless the subject matter in the movie interests me. But one of the things that I really do like is this series. I want to say that it's called The Green Valley or In the Green Valley, but it's basically about these people who are recreating life during the 1600s in England, living on this farm, and it really is one of my favorite TV series. I've watched a lot of the episodes recently. You can find them on YouTube if you search for them. And I will link to some of them so you don't even have to search if you're remotely interested in it. But they're just watching them for some reason. I like the subject matter. It's interesting to me and it fills me with joy. Although I've seen the whole series probably 3 times. So yeah, there's some redundancy there, but I just enjoyed it. It makes me feel good to watch them. So. Okay, so let's get into this card reading. Another thing I will say about this, I will not be reading from a book. This deck was a gift, and it was bought in a second-hand store. Thankfully, all the cards were there with the deck. However, the book was not, and so I may attempt to get, a copy of the book somehow in the future, but I don't have one right now. So this reading is going to be simply my interpretations of the cards on an intuitive level. Let me take a moment here to connect with the deck. There again, I'm very new at this, and I'm learning different procedures. I don't think necessarily it's something that you pick up, in a day or a week or a month, maybe not even a year. I will say I think the more that you work with your cards and try to build that intuitive and magical bond, quite likely the more success you're going to have with your reading. And but it does really interest me, and I just think that these cards are beautiful. I will show you. Let me do the 3 cards first, and then go forward. We're going to do 3. Now these cards are not in any order, and they don't necessarily align with any specific days, but I'm going to go right to left. I didn't think of this. There wasn't foreshadowing to begin with. One thing I'll say about this oracle, therein it's an oracle, and so you're not dealing with standard sets like the 9 of Cups or the 10 of Wands. So here, our first card is the Star Fairy, and it's going to take, and this is reversed as well. It's upside down, so I don't know how well it will show up on the screen. So you'll just have to bear with my limited technology. Give me a moment to be here with the card and see what's there. Well, with it being reversed, the intuition that I gather from it is a transition. I mean, I think literally of a fallen star, some type of change, not necessarily bad, but transformation. That's mainly what I get from this card. And I do think that this will be a significant transition. I don't think this will be mild or moderate. Like, this is a big deal. Some type of shift, either in a job or. But I don't get the impression that it's like with work or even academics, really. Like, this is more to the heart. Like, this is life, a change in life. You know, maybe a change in a relationship, but it's, yeah, I would say significant. That's all I'm getting at this moment from that card, so I'm going to see what the next one reveals. Another reverse card. Here we have the Lady of the Forest. I'm going to show it to you upside down first, and then I will turn it up so that you can see the picture better. Okay, Lady of the Forest. I don't know. I'm not getting a lot of clarity from this card. So my interpretation on this would be, at best, a guess. For some reason, to me, in looking at the card, there is significance in this. Like, it's making an L, but I don't think it's about the letter L. I think it's about that direction, like some sort of rune it's trying to speak to, and I don't know what that rune is. If we pair it with this fallen star, I meant to say, there again, I just get this impression of change. And I mean, Lady of the Forest ultimately makes me think of the earth and plants, you know, greenery. I'm not sure. Maybe the next card will lend a little more clarity, hopefully. But there again, if you know more about runes, or you know, that sort of odd L, that might speak to you. Another reverse card. Okay, here we have the rocks. And there again, like, I'm not familiar with these cards as far as the book is concerned, so certainly I do not know the symbolism. I will show this to you reversed and then turn it where you can see it. Okay. There are a lot of symbols in this card. You've got a lion with a scepter on some type of pole that looks more like a candy cane. I don't know, though, honestly. On an intuitive level, when I look at the card face up, I see almost like the Lonely King. You know, I see isolation, I see separation, because he's here in this card alone. I mean, there are some figures above him, but they're distant and separate. I almost would say that that's more ornamental than anything. And his expression seems very sad and somber, even though, you know, he has the scepter, and he's adorned as one might think a king would be. But there again, this was reversed, and so this tells me possibly this is a change, a transition, moving from a lonely place, or, you know, a place of isolation, to, yeah, a change that lends a sense of community or networking with other people. And ironically, I watched a video literally a few hours ago on the Sears Cottage channel, and basically she kind of said the same thing, in a way. So it's neat to me, the correlation there. But yeah, overall, these three cards, that's the impression that I get. Some type of change. I'm still at a loss about the Lady of the Forest card, but I do see this as isolation reversed, you know, as a sort of coming into community. Also, though, I see here a need for humility, a need to lay the scepter and the crown and the adornment aside, you know, and move from a compassionate, generous place when you're making this change. So yeah, that's what I take. I wanted to show you the back of these cards. There again, as I said, I think that they're very beautiful. I would at some point like to get a tarot deck, but I'm not sure which deck, or I haven't done any sort of browsing or shopping for decks. I'm actually going to mix these back into the deck as they came out. But I would like to have both, an Oracle deck and a tarot deck. So we will see what the future holds for that. I hope to do more readings in the future. I want to practice and work with the cards more, to align my energies to them and explore, you know, that experience of working with and reading cards. I think that would be very beneficial and enjoyable. I may even eventually start doing a weekly reading, possibly. I don't know. Time will tell on that. So, yeah, there's another thing, as I mentioned earlier, that I wanted to get into, and I will try to keep this brief, although it may prove to be difficult because, as I usually say, this is a complicated subject matter. So yeah, it's hard to cover it in 2 sentences. You know, just it doesn't fall easily into that spectrum. So, in order to get into this, I wanted to mention a TED Talk that I watched years ago that I really liked. It's by a guy named Chris Abani. Hopefully I didn't butcher his last name. But he does a TED Talk called On Humanity, and I'll link to it in the description of this video. The talk itself is really beautiful, and there's a lot of wisdom there, and it's eloquent, it's really well done, and I highly recommend that you go and check it out, whether you agree with what I'm going to say about it or not, because the point that I'm making about his video is only a small part of the video. So bear that in mind. But I want to share this part. And you can find this in the video. He's talking about a group of people called the Igbo, and he says the Igbo people said that they created their gods. If a god became unruly and started asking for human sacrifice, they would knock down the shrine to that god and stop saying the god's name. For some reason, that line has been in my head lately. Like, yeah, like I said, this is complex, but basically, what that says to me, it reminds me that names have power. I don't think I'm going out on a limb and saying that. In a lot of magical traditions, people will tell you and they will say names have power. Words themselves have power. So, kind of my point from what I just read is, I've noticed recently, both on YouTube and Twitter, and just media in general, particularly in the news, certain people, certain names are just being regurgitated over and over and over, particularly where politics are concerned. It's this individual did this and this individual did this, and it's like this spiral. And somewhere along the way, I feel like there's this element that we're missing, and it's this notion of names having power. When you say a name over and over and over again, and you invest a lot of energy, whether it's like fear or anger or angst or whatever, in a sense, I believe personally that you're adding magical energy to that name, whether you agree with it or not. So kind of the point of this little ramble is, I think we would be better off to avoid that practice if at all possible. Here again, I wrote this on the bottom. I am not saying necessarily that people should ignore what's happening in the world. What I am saying, though, is that maybe it's a good idea to be aware of the power that your words have. I think you can inform other people about what's going on without regurgitating names and without, quote unquote, carrying that torch. Really, if you hearken back to the election and all of that, when an election is going on, and I think, in my opinion, this is part of the reason why our election here in the U.S. went the way it did. You had a lot of people regurgitating a name, and it was saying, oh, this person did this, and it was really stupid, or, look how ignorant this person is. But still and yet, you're perpetuating that name. And so that name was on the lips of all people, no matter, which side of the fence you stood on. If you had a side or if you were neutral, it didn't matter. Like, if you existed in the U.S. and you had access to media, more than likely that name was going to be there somewhere. It became this thing, and ultimately, for a lot of various reasons, not solely because of this name thing, but I think the name thing played a role, and I think it continues to play a role. So that may not make any sense, but I believe what we say, and particularly when you're dealing with names and labels and that sort of energy, like, I think it can be dangerous. If you put any stock into anything that people have said and are now saying about the recent eclipse and supposed shifts, that our planet is in now, and particularly people here, it's like, I believe we're moving into a space where magical ability is more accessible possibly than it was in the past. So to me, it's almost good and bad. On the one hand, it's positive in that, hopefully people will move toward enlightenment and awaken themselves to what's going on and their own, creative, magical abilities. At the same time, I think there is this sort of wild magic out there. There's a potential for people to start really causing effects with their thoughts and their emotions, and they don't know it. I mean, it's not like they're going out and casting a circle and directing energy like a laser. I think people now, and more so in the future, they're going to start shooting their magical weapons like shotguns, and so it's just going to go everywhere, and it may be, you know, who knows. Like, I don't know how that'll turn out. Now, maybe that's alarmist of me. This is just my view and my opinion. That may change in the future. But I thought it was worth noting, and that was, you know, that energy that I kept getting from the universe, that this, particularly this about the name thing, that I needed to say something about it. Outside of politics, in the pagan community, there have been some things that have come up, and one of them, yet again, it also deals with carrying this name. Like, there was a very famous person in the pagan community who had taught a lot of courses on reading tarot and working with oracle decks. And her name was, I'm not going to say her name. I will link it in the description of this video. Like, I'll link some information there, but I'm not going to say it. Because there again, I don't want to perpetuate this stuff, but there have been a lot of consecutive VRs, like video responses, about what happened. And I'm not saying that those video responses are bad at all. However, I am saying maybe it's a good idea to start making responses without carrying names, you know, or making up new names, you know, like changing that box so that you don't create the same kind of magic that I think is taking place. In some ways, I almost kind of feel like carrying that name is like propaganda, whether you mean it to be propaganda or not, because you're still, in a way, you're casting a spell of carrying that information, like those letters, you know. It is a weird metaphysical sigil in a way. There again, this is all, you know, just me and my opinions and impressions, so you may or may not agree. But like I said, I do recommend that you go and you watch the TED Talk that I will link in the description. Probably in the next video that I do, I'm going to mention some other TED Talks. There's just some great talks there on TED. It's one of my favorite sites, and I've written a lot of blog entries over the years about some of these videos, you know, but not everyone wants to go and read a blog, so I may mention some more of them and do some revisiting in future episodes. I was going to get into another level, you know, not regarding the name thing, but I think this video has probably ran long enough. As I said in my last video, a lot is going on, you know. I'm involved in a lot of work, not just work on magic, but other stuff, and so and a lot of it is internal. It's, you know, this dialogue from the universe where I'm having to look at the way I'm living my life and what needs to change and what I need to improve on versus, you know, what's going okay and directions, and so it's sort of big, but not bad. I'm not saying it's bad at all, but a lot of introspection and work. So I will probably go into that more in later videos. Yeah, I do recommend that you also check out Seer's Cottage. I really enjoyed her videos, and I think that you might too. I may list some other YouTube users. I don't know about that. That's sort of hit or miss. I think I mentioned in my last video that I had been practicing some rituals, and that practice has continued. I've also been doing the meditation, um, and still learning more about the meditation, sort of altering the approach as I go along. But I had this realization this evening, this understanding that I think there's this sort of growing process that's occurring, particularly with the rituals, which is good. I mean, I feel like I'm more so finding my place. Certainly, I still have a lot of work to do and a lot more practice, before I feel very confident in doing ritual. But I still enjoy it. I enjoy the process of, getting ready, doing the ritual bath and the whole 9 yards, setting it up, focusing energy, casting a circle. I like it. Whereas I can remember years and years ago, there again, we're talking 20 years ago, I was a teenager basically, trying to figure out some of this stuff. I was very turned away from ritual, particularly because it seemed like a lot of work. Now, being older and a little more reflective, I understand, at least for me, the work is important. The work reminds me that I'm willing to invest time and energy and effort to explore this subject matter, and it's meaningful and important to me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing the work. So, for me, that's very valuable to know that and have that awareness. And I want to carry that in the future. I hope to carry that forward. Another thing I wanted to mention here, it's been a really long time since I've read anything solely for pleasure. There again, typically if I'm reading a book about magic. I'd like to read a book, just to enjoy reading, but I'd like to read something about magic. So I'm very open to recommendations of series or single books, that any of you watching this, you think it's a good series or something that I would enjoy. Definitely leave me a comment to this video and let me know what you've read or what you like. I can rattle off some of my favorite authors, and it'll give you an idea of those works that I do enjoy. I'm a huge fan of Neil Gaiman. I read almost everything that Stephen King's ever done. I like the Dragonlance series is one of my favorites. Yeah, a lot of different things on magic. Peter Straub does some books on magic. Clive Barker. It doesn't necessarily have to be scary. I've read a lot of horror books, and I'm not really necessarily in the mood for that particular genre. But yeah, really anything that focuses on magic, that would be interesting to me. So definitely I'm open to recommendations on that note. I think that's about all I have for this video. Like I said, it was sort of impromptu. I mean, it had been planned, but literally I sketched this out, what I was going to say, what I was going to go into in about 5 minutes. So yeah, I think the next video will probably include the cards, and I think tentatively I may want to talk about sigils. Sigils are very interesting to me. I mentioned them in a previous video, and I'm learning more about making sigils and working with sigils and that whole process. And it might be interesting to share some of that via the video. So those are some possibilities. As I always say to you, I hope that all of you are well. Particularly those of you who may be in the path of, the storm and bad weather that had come in. Yeah. I will speak to you soon, hopefully. definitely, as I said, leave me a comment if you enjoyed the video. It does help with the inertia of taking the time to sit down and trying to reach out and share your ideas. Like, a comment is very meaningful and helpful. So give me a like and leave a comment if you're inclined. And yeah, I will hopefully talk to you soon.